We are in the kind of the last chapter of the common part of Daniel. There's actually a lot of history that has taken place in between these chapters. That's not God's concern. He's not really concerned about recording all the details of all the history of this period. He is concerned about sharing the highlights of what's important for us to know for our faith, for our heritage, and this constant theme that we are seeing that God is the sovereign one. God is the one truly in charge, and that has been and will continue to be a theme throughout this book. Daniel chapter 6, at the very end of chapter 5, we've seen Belshazzar, which is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. I'm trying to remember Neomodian or something like that. It's the son, the father of Belshazzar. But history does show that he was a regent in this area. But then he came back and people tried to squabble over the accuracy of Daniel. But like I said before, it's very common for there to be co-regents in the, or co-kings, if you would, especially among family members. The next one, the Darius the Mede, we saw at the end, is the one who came in and defeated Belshazzar, led the Medes and the Persians in. The Medes, if you think of where they're from the same place. They're from a different part of what we would consider Iran today, as the Persians are also from there. And eventually, it's not so much that they kind of joined forces in the beginning, but then Cyrus will eventually wipe out the Medes, and it'll just be the Persians. Who this Darius the Mede is debated. There is a lot of possibilities. People say, well, Daniel didn't know his history, and he borrowed a name from the future and brought it back here. I don't believe that's true at all. I believe that we probably just are missing some pieces. And I'll give you this just as a little anecdote, but also as a piece to keep in mind when we talk about history and archaeology in the Bible. We only know, estimated, about 5% of what we consider the Bible lands, and this is kind of even extending past that, has actually been excavated. So we do know a lot, we have a lot, but there's so much more yet to possibly be found. I'll give you two examples to keep in mind. For a long time throughout the Enlightenment, up until the early 1900s, one of the things that was used against Scripture was the emphasis on the Hittites in the Old Testament. And so there's no such thing as Hittites, and never was Hittites. And then guess what they found? Not just a few things, they found a whole town that belonged to the Hittites and so forth. And another big one was David. A lot of people said that David was just basically a Jewish King Arthur. And whether you believe there was a King Arthur or not, the whole idea is that he was this fabled king that people gave a bunch of lore to. And then guess what they found in the past probably about 40 years? They found inscriptions with David from other nations, talking about King David. And then they found coins and seals with David's seal. And then guess what they found? One of David's houses. So it's very possible that this Darius the Mede, though he doesn't appear in current history that we have, is simply a name that will show up later when we find something. But it's also very possible that he has more than one name. We've already seen this in this book. What is Daniel's name? Yeah, Daniel's Hebrew name was Daniel, right? But his Babylonian name was Belteshazzar. And of course, we know Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by their Babylonian names. It's not a very uncommon thing. It's a very common thing. Plus, when you have rulers, they tend to switch their names. And they will pull the name, that almost becomes, that's how we get dynastic names of people they admired beforehand. That's how we end up with, all the Georges and stuff in British history. Well, most of them weren't actually named George, but they took the name and switched it to King George when they became king so that they could use that name. So there's a lot of reasons why maybe this name doesn't appear. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. That's all I'm going to spend on it. But if you're reading something, they say, oh, well, we don't know who this is. It's because we don't know who this is. Doesn't change the story, though. We do know historically that the events that we just read about with the Medes and the Persians coming in, going under the wall, ransacking the palace, taking over Babylon, did happen. And Daniel records it happening too, except he tells us why it happened. All right, so we are in chapter 6. Babylon has fallen. Remember, chapter 2, we had these series of world, at least in that area of the world, these huge or big empires. And we know that the first one was Babylonians. We are in the second phase. We're going to have the Medes and the Persians. The Persians are going to grow bigger and stronger. I do want to make mention that when you see gold, you see silver, you see bronze, you see iron, that's not a distinction of the value of the nation. I don't think that's it at all. Babylon is shorter lived than Persia, and Persia conquered a lot of ground. But if you think about it, of all four of those, the Greeks were much more prominent than either of those two, and then the Romans, they didn't rule as much ground as Alexander the Great, but they ruled it longer. So that's not the point. The point is to distinguish them, I think, rather than the value being associated. But we are in that second time period. Chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. So this is kind of your middle management. A little bit more than that, but if you think about, I don't know what to compare it to in our system, because you're going to see you're going to have governors over that, and then of course the king or the emperor. And over these three governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. You know what's missing here? Why was Daniel appointed one? The Medes and the Persians didn't know who he was, did they? Or they might have. If he was, someone who was kind of an ambassador and that kind of role, maybe they knew him. So there's some history missing here. He did something. God raised him up. God put him in the eye and the view of something for him to become one of these governors. And so you have him rise up under the Babylonians, and now again underneath the Medes and Persians. All right, just a couple more verses, and then it'll set the scene for us. Verse 3. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. I don't know what's happened. I don't know really how much time has taken place, but what is common is something we saw with Joseph and something we've seen with Daniel. Why are they rising up the ranks? God's with them. Yeah. Now, they're part of it. They're doing their part of that. I don't want to make light of that, but God is with them. Remember, constantly we have that phrase, and Joseph would find favor in the eyes of. We see that also with Daniel, if not worded exactly the same, very similarly, right? He showed favor with the chief of the eunuchs, and then with Nebuchadnezzar, and now with this Darius the Mede. And he wants to make him over all the governors and satraps. So kind of like the Joseph role, kind of a prime minister type thing. So verse 4. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Does that sound familiar? Let's read that one more time. This is what the scripture says about Daniel, at least in this moment, okay? So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Jesus. It does sound a lot like Jesus, doesn't it? I'm not saying Daniel was like Jesus, but I don't think that wording is by mistake. There's another character we find in the Old Testament that has very similar language to Jesus, which is Samuel. And so you kind of almost see these precursors of what to expect. Though we see it on the other side because we see the whole, right? We see Daniel the key, or Jesus the key. But God was already alluding to what leadership looked like, wasn't he? He was already telling his people what it means to be faithful, what faithfulness can do, how it can conquer, and how it can lead. He was showing us that in Daniel, in David, in Joseph, in so many figures from the Old Testament. So they want to get rid of him. They can't find any charge because it says he was faithful. Now, this is really tricky for me. Because is this a Jewish nation we're talking about? No? What nation's in control? Okay, it's going to be Persia. Okay, if you're going to try to spend a lot of time on the Medes, you're going to have a harder time understanding. Pretty much there was no distinction except for a distinction. They were the same people, just two different tribes of the same people, and they eventually are conquered. They go to war against each other, and the Persians prevail. Think like the Spartans and the Athenians if you're into Greek history. If you're not, just let that go, and we'll come back to something else. How's that? But when we talk about these people, they are not God worshipers, not God Jehovah worshipers. They are what? Yeah, they worship pagan gods. They worship multiple gods. They worship the Azareth. They worship all these other things. They worship some of the Baals. They worship some of the Philistine gods that we see, like Dagon and so forth. And they pulled them from the Assyrians, which got them from the Philistines. And they have this plethora of gods, but Jehovah is not one of them. So, in that world, in that land, where they worship different gods, where they have different laws, in which Daniel, no doubt, has all these opportunities to be faithful to the law and yet not be faithful to God. Yet, this is what we have. He was faithful. And they couldn't find a charge against him. That's phenomenal to me. But they're not going to be happy with that. When you want to get rid of somebody, what extent will someone go to get rid of somebody? What we just study about Jesus, right? It doesn't matter. The facts don't matter. Eventually, we just know it's true, so we're just going to pursue it until we find it. And that's what these men are going to do. And it's going to be set up, they're going to set this up with Daniel and the prayer here in a moment. But we have a different nation. We have different gods, if you would. We have different leadership. We have the same worldly problems. Okay? So here's Daniel. He wants King Darius wants to make him head over all these governors. Where was I? Oh, verse 6. So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Okay. I want to point out, again, we're not going to belabor the point, and maybe I'm giving you too many things to chew on, and I don't mean to do that, but there are tactics that repeat themselves. And look at the text, and look at what you see. There was no evidence, so they couldn't get something on him, so they're going to conspire. What do? They go to the king, and what do they say?
Create a law.
We're going to create a law, a statute, a law, same thing.
That they know Daniel will obey.
Yes, they do know that, but they're not going to say that. It's a setup. Look at what they say, though. Let's put it in different wording, okay? All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, everybody who is somebody agrees we should pass this law. And here's the second part. To make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you. What's the second part? They're playing to the king's what?
Yeah.
Pride and ego. It's nothing new. This is what's done all the time. And this is what's going to set it up. So we tried to find evidence. It didn't work because Daniel was faithful. And here we go. We've got this setup. Basically everybody's doing it. Old kind of peer pressure thing, but I think it's more than that. Everybody who's somebody, everybody who's smart, everybody who's wise believes this to be true. And you see this tactic all the time. It doesn't matter who believes something to be true. It doesn't necessarily make it true, does it?
Nope.
No. For a long time, all the wise men of the world believed if you were sick, you should cut the patient and let their blood bleed out. Was that true? No. How many people died? Yeah, they didn't have that problem anymore. Yeah, I mean, they didn't all die, but there were some that died that might not have died if it weren't for that treatment. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the earth being round. We could talk about so many examples, and yet you still see it today. There is this idea of expert, or the idea of the popularity being something true. If everybody votes for it or believes it, it's true. And watching our politics today, why do we take so many polls? Yeah. So it's not whether something is true or not. And I don't mean to get political here, but there's one that just bugs me still to this day, and I'm not going to because it's political, but because it's human, and because God spoke on these things. In the beginning, He created man and woman. Did He not? Yeah. And for how many thousands of years did humanity understand that? And then we get into modern times and like, no. There's 60 different genders. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, gender is kind of a made-up idea anyway. We're talking about the sexes, and if you want to add a different word, that's fine, but you're not going to change it. There's male and female, there's man and there's woman. Well, what do? They take a poll. Well, 70% of the United States believes that there's more than two genders. So that makes it true. We've got to see these things. We've got to understand them. They're not new. They're old. How many people in the crowd believe Jesus to be the blasphemer? How many people in the crowd believed on Mount Carmel back in 1 Kings 18 that the Baals were what you should worship and not Jehovah? The whole of Israel, it said, is surrounded there, northern 10 tribes, 450 Baal prophets, the king and the queen, and there's Elijah. Everybody, even if they're supposedly smart, believing something to be true doesn't make it true. What makes something true? There you go. It's simple. It's hard to figure out sometimes, but it's true. And I've used that example before. Everybody in here would take a poll, and I don't think it would come out this way. And if everybody in here 100% said we don't believe there's gravity, are we all going to start floating away? So I'm going to change the reality that there is, right? Okay, I'm off that soapbox. Let's go back to the text.
Before you get completely off,
You want to join me on the soapbox?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go back up there.
I'll get back up there. There you go.
Is that really so that there's 70% people believe there's more than two genders?
No, I'm just throwing out a number. I didn't mean that. I just used that as an example. I'm sorry.
Okay. I didn't know.
But the problem with polls, too, is they use tricky wording to make sure they push people to what they want, too. And then they reinterpret it to say something that even the poll didn't say. Yeah, I apologize. I was just using a number to make it a point. I don't know what you
got.
got.
Also surveys where you say, well, how do you identify yourself? And
Yeah. The point is if 100% people said they believed it, it still wouldn't make it true.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But I thought.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off. Yeah. I should be more careful. I did not mean that to be an actual number. Unfortunately, it's probably higher than we would like, but it's probably not 70. I hope it's not 70%. Though, if you asked about 10 years ago, out of fear, I wonder if you'd get those numbers. Anyway, so everybody's for this. They play to his pride. Verse 8, Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. Did anybody ask Daniel? Did the king ask Daniel?
We've told everyone to agree.
A lot of pressure. Oh man, I don't want to stand against everybody who's somebody. Next time you hear an argument in the realm of the sciences versus what God would say, that's the best way I can say it. Listen, I am not an anti-science person. I think science itself is a good thing. It's helped us to put planes in the air. It's helped us to diagnose problems and sickness. It's theoretical science that I end up with issues with. But you'll see, back during a certain time, not long ago, when we were talking about all these masks, and what was the claim? Well, all the science and all the scientists say, I mean, it's used all the time. All the smart people believe this. It's done to our kids. Well, all the scientists, that's not true. There's a ton of scientists that believe in creation. They're not emphasized. Sometimes they're ostracized. Do you know that the first time, I think it was the University of South Dakota or North Dakota, it was one of the two, they found a T-Rex bone. I know I'm getting off kilter here, but they found a T-Rex bone with soft tissue still in place. Okay? Now think about that. We're talking about ligaments and cartilage and not the blood cells themselves, but like the arteries, the outside of that, had not fossilized, decayed, completely not gone. In a T-Rex bone that's supposed to have lived billions of years ago. And now they found multiple, by the way. It's not just one, they found multiple of these. So we do that on a different day. But the man who picked that up and did a paper on it, I cannot remember his name, I can see his face, he got fired from a tenured position because he dared declare that bone could not be billions of years old. Check your sources, is what I'm saying. Do not be persuaded just because someone says, oh, everybody that's somebody believes this. That doesn't make it true. Now, maybe it's true sometimes. Maybe it's true most of the time. But it's not true every time.
It's hard to know what to believe anymore. I mean,
It is.
Go out and try to, but you read something,
Yeah, I know. Let's go take this. I've already been on my soapbox, so I'm going to get off my soapbox and get back to Daniel. Daniel's in Persia. They passed a decree. Nobody can pray to any god. Did you notice that? Except for who? Which means that Darius saw himself as a god. Okay, so this is the beginning of that Persian concept of, which is not new to them, and it's not end with them. It continues on.
Is this the same Darius that Darius the Mede, or is this the king? Is this, do you know?
I think so. I think the Mede part is interesting to me. So I don't know. Darius the First was a Persian king, but he lived a little bit past. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of debate on it, Alan. I'm not sure.
I mean, it could be a different Darius.
It could be, but it seems to not suggest that inside that we switched. But anyways, it is possible. Because we are not told. Remember what I said, that all of a sudden he rose up. Well, how did he rise up? How long did it take? When was he recognized? Could it be the first king, Darius, the Mede, passed on in the second one? But we're getting kind of old with Daniel, if that's the case. So, there's a lot of things there. And I think if we had to know, God would tell us. I think it's interesting, and I get caught up in these things because I want to know, but I can't. I don't have a good answer for you on that now. All right, so we've got the setup. Verse 10. What is Daniel going to do when he hears this law, that he cannot pray to anybody except to the king?
Knelt down and started praying.
Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Did he go do it despite the king? He went to do it because that's what he's always done with his God? Did he open the window so everybody would see him on purpose? No, he did it because that's what he had always done. What do we see in Daniel? Loyalty, faithfulness. Look at the comment about what he prayed for. And prayed and gave thanks before his God. Now, I don't know what all he prayed for, but we do know they just passed a law where everybody's out to get you, and your life is on the line, and he's giving thanks to God. What's he giving thanks to God for? I don't know what his exact words are. Go ahead. Yeah, he was just in a mode where he was going to recognize God's goodness. And I don't know exactly if he was saying thank you for my health, or thank you for my life, or thank you for your blessing. I don't know. We just know that he gave thanks to God. But it doesn't say he was sitting there sweating and anxious and all those things. That's what I would be. I'd still be praying, I hope, but we see something different in Daniel. Now, I don't think Daniel is a young man anymore. I think he is an older man by this time. He would have to be. And when I say older, he was taken as a teenager. We go through 586 to somewhere around 540 something, I think is when. I'd have to double check that. And Alan, maybe you've studied that and you remember. When Babylon falls, so that's 40 some, and then we're 40 to 50 years, and then you're into, and it's a little bit longer if he was taken in 605, the first run. So, I mean, he would be an older man. There's no way around that, depending on how much time has passed since the fall of Babylon to these events. Anyways, but he's been faithful this whole time. He has been doing this since he got there. This is the way I read that. Since early days, seems to say to me, since he ended up in this place, and he's been praying. Well, they know exactly where he's at, don't they? Look at verse 11. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. There's another clue as to what he's praying for. A supplication is what? A prayer on behalf of something or someone. So he's praying for somebody. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, this thing is true according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, I love the expression, that Daniel, that son of yours. That's what I used to do to Tiffany when the kids were acting up and say, well, your son or your daughter. They were mine when they were good. Anyway, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, and for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Now, this man, whoever he might be, is a different man than Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not saying he's a good man, but he is a different man. Instead of being infuriated like Nebuchadnezzar was with the 3 men, he's actually distraught over what he's been kind of pulled into. Because he knows Daniel and he obviously sees highly of him. All right, so verse 14. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. In other words, he spent that whole day trying to find some way out of it. Now, I am not an expert on Medes or Persian law. And we saw the emphasis made time and time again that it doesn't change, it doesn't alter. So I'm going to put this into the space over there, Alan, for you to chew on. We're trying to identify who this is. If he is the emperor, like Cyrus will be later, like Darius the First, he can do anything he wants to. So why is he so bound by the law? it's possible he's a co-regent, not the man. It's also possible he may just be loyal to their tradition, but he works all day to try to figure out until the sun goes down a way out of this. Because why? Yeah. He doesn't want to see Daniel killed, even though he broke his law, right? So he's not Nebuchadnezzar in this. Nebuchadnezzar was furious. Remember, he wanted the fire even hotter. So we'll say what we can about him based on that, but they're going to carry through with it. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. Let's keep going. Verse 15, Then these men approached the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, Your God whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. I want you to think about this as you read this last part. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his Lord, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Okay, let me go back up, and I'm just going to read this through again and see if you don't hear some shadows, some foreshadowing. We got the setup. He was innocent. We have the demand of the people, but the law demands it. Remember the people around the palisade there with Jesus saying, we have no king but Caesar. Remember their challenge to Pilate, don't make us tell Caesar that Pilate's no friend of Caesar. You see that play on that national stage, and then what happens? Well, he tries to get out of it. Pontius Pilate tried to get out of it. He tried to beat him. He tried to offer Barabbas. He tried to take him to Herod. He tried to, wash his hands of the whole thing. And then eventually, whatever's carried out, so in that case, Jesus is crucified. Daniel is thrown into a den of lions, which is then sealed with a stone. And it's sealed with a signet ring. In other words, if that seal is broken, someone's going to pay for it. And Daniel is put in with a bunch of lions. Now, I don't know. This sounds morbid, and I hope you all don't take it the wrong way. But, there has been those thoughts in my life. If you're going to die, I'd rather not wake up. There are things that I really don't want to go through. Do you all feel me if you've been there too? I don't know, being mauled and ripped apart by a bunch of hungry lions is on the top of my list, right? So he's thrown into this den. It's sealed. And of course, we know what happens. Verse 18. The king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No musicians were brought before him. Also, his sleep went from him. So he's up all night. What is he doing?
I'm worried.
Yeah, he's worried. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God. Whoa! When did this man learn about the living God?
I think he did.
Absolutely.
Has been for a while.
He had been hearing it from Daniel and seeing it in Daniel all this time. Didn't mean he believed it. But now, he's calling forth. He's giving tribute, right? All right. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able, and here's that terminology we saw even with the three friends earlier with Nebuchadnezzar, been able to deliver you from the lions. And then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. Man, I'd be saying can you move the rock? I'm done in here. But he calls back and he's fine. He's safe. And if we keep reading, my God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth so they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him, and also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den. No injury whatever was found on him because he believed in his God. I mean, if we're just reading this for the first time, what has God been trying to tell us through the life of Daniel?
He's in charge.
He's in charge. I think that's, remember, we said that from the beginning, he's the sovereign. Others may look like they're in charge, but who's actually in charge? God.
God.
What else do you think God is trying to teach us here? Faith in Him. Why is faith in Him so critical?
Well, he just wasn't going to give up. He had believed in him for a long time and wasn't going to quit now.
Yeah, that's true of Daniel. But why do you think our faith is so critical? Why is it so important to God?
Because he loves us.
I believe that's true. I believe that's absolutely true. I do want to put one more thing in the space. You're absolutely right. I'm not like correcting this or anything. Who's reading this? Who has read this? Who will read this? Faith teaches. So what does it teach us? This world is not always going to be a nice place. It's not always going to be kind. Why is it so critical for Daniel to be so faithful? Because we need to see it. Is it possible that's in part, not the only reason, but in part, why we need to be faithful? See that pretty girl back there with the hair up, like she came from Whoville? Huh?
I'm jealous.
You're jealous because of the hair? Well, I mean, Jess may have another one of those. She could probably find enough hair somewhere, but it might not be on the top. It may have to be on the side. Because they're watching. Daniel's been freed. Daniel's been set free. The king is happy. The king is ecstatic. He's joyous. God has gotten praised. Verse 24. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Whew, this gets tough. Them, their children, their wives, and the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. I don't want this to come out wrong. I just want to be observant. This is a fierce and sometimes very, very hard world. But you know, God is not a cream puff. And I don't want this to come out wrong. I'm not trying. God is loving. God loves us beyond measure. But sometimes I think we see God as being, this. He's grandpa. He's grandma, right? As long as you're healthy, you can eat when you're not supposed to. You can have the sugar that your parents won't let you have. I know that none of you all have done that with your grandkids, but you can act up, you can do whatever, and then mom and dad are like, they weren't like that when I was growing up, and we have this vision of God being that way. My favorite line, I've already shared it with you, from C.S. Lewis's work, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Narnia series. Little Lucy has gone through the wardrobe. She meets Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, I know. Bucky's before there was Bucky's, I guess. I don't know. And they're talking to him in their house, and she's talking about Aslan, which is the Jesus kind of personification in that movie, or that book, if you've seen either one. And he's a lion. Which is interesting. And, of course, that was a symbol of Judah, and that's a symbol of power and strength in that area. And he's used with Jesus, so that makes sense. And she asked, is he safe? Now, this is not Scripture. This is someone's rendition from Scripture, but I think it makes the point better than I can. And Mr. Beaver says, no, he's not safe. But he's good. Our God is not safe. What happened to these men who decided to conspire against his man Daniel? but he's good. What would have happened if these men would have, hey, we're wrong, we should serve the living God? Might there have been a different, maybe. God is faithful, God is good, but God will bring justice. And that's something that we have to keep balanced. It's not something we can forget. I think some people walk away with the idea that God in the Old Testament was cranky and moody and wrathful, and that God in the New Testament, well, he's just joyous and gracious and loving. It's the same God, isn't it? Those two things are both apart. Matter of fact, Paul says, beware the goodness and, we know the rest of that? The severity of God. We've got to see both of it. We need to see him for who he is. I don't say that to frighten us. I don't say it to scare us, because God is good. And if we walk with him, Daniel, Joseph, what should we learn?
Didn't it say in James that God is the lawgiver who's able to save and to destroy?
Mm-hmm. He will deliver us. It may not always be in the way we think or want it to be, but he will deliver us. And we'll use that as our invitation tonight. You know, we are going to face trials. We're going to face hardships, and there are going to be things that befall us that we don't want to carry. I don't think Joseph signed up. I don't think Daniel signed up. I don't think the three friends of Daniel signed up for the idea of the things that they had to face. I think Daniel would have much rather not been ripped from his home and stayed with his family and grown up in his nation. I think Joseph would have much loved to have grown up and seen his father and watched his brothers grow up and his nieces and nephews and possibly gotten married and all that stuff back there with his family. Right? I mean, I'm sure Moses would have loved to, in the first, even when he turned against the Egyptians and tried to save the Hebrews, and he would have loved for his people to accept him, and except they didn't. This world's hard sometimes. We've got to be faithful. We've got to learn from Daniel, from all these men, but we're in this study of Daniel, from the women we see. We talked about that on Sunday morning, from the Marys and from Sloan and from... This is a different study, and I won't get into that. But Sloan, you should look her up. She is the wife of one of the members of the house of Caesar. Anyway, but tonight, it's faithfulness. It's what empowers us to be delivered. Okay? Doesn't mean we're going to be delivered from every hardship that comes our way. But ultimately, what has God promised?
Eternal life.
Yes, sir. The ultimate deliverance from all pain, suffering, and strife. Right? Tonight, if you are in need of prayer, if you have not obeyed the gospel, we certainly want to extend an opportunity for you to let those needs be known. But I hope that if that's not you necessarily tonight, that you don't have something public you need to pray for, but maybe as we sing this song, you'll do as Daniel did. Give thanks to God. Remember his goodness, even in the midst of hard days. But would you stand with us as we sing this song of invitation?